3-2.2 The Need for a New Strategy. To put it simply, the state is a problem. Fortunately, humans are innovative creatures. We are not just tool makers, as the anthropologists like to call us. After all, lots of animals use tools, and some animals make their tools. Rather, we are problem solvers. For humans, tools are not just a way to crack a nut. Tools are a step in the process of problem solving. The human doesn't just find or make a tool for a job. The human keeps the tool and uses it or modifies it to fit whatever problem needs to be solved. Once the human masters a tool, the human will look for other tasks to use the same tool on. So the basket that was created to carry berries becomes a bucket to carry water and a bowl to mix the berries with the water. Another aspect of human nature is our fascination with watching other humans solve problems. For lack of a better word, we are voyeuristic, not only in our reproductive habits, but in our tendency to take pleasure in watching others confronting challenges and seeing others overcome those challenges. This is why we enjoy stories, novels, movies, and other forms of entertainment that tell the story of someone overcoming a problem. It's also the reason people like to watch game shows and reality shows on television. An aspect of this deeply human tendency is to copy or mimic the methods of problem solving that we observe other humans successfully utilizing. In spite of what authoritarians want to teach our children, copying is not cheating. Without the human urge to copy, we would still be naked sitting under a bush in the Kalahari eating bugs. But we are not naked eating bugs because humans naturally copy from each other. We make and modify tools, and we solve problems. Actually, humans not only excel at problem solving, we thrive on it. The vast majority of games that people play are simple exercises in problem solving, and humans love games. So we should think of the state as nothing more than a problem. A very serious problem, but just a problem. And I might add, the state is not necessarily the biggest problem humans have overcome. It's only the current problem. Remember, while other megafauna around us were experiencing mass extinction during and directly after the last ice age that happened in conjunction with radical climate upheavals, humans thrived and even experienced a sort of population explosion. Keeping the problem in perspective, we must reject the myth that the tools commonly used are the only tools that can be used. Since using the political means is both unethical and counterproductive, and since civil disobedience is nothing more than a publicity stunt at best and always involves unnecessary risk, and since speaking truth for posterity is great but does little, if anything, to advance our cause in the present tense, and agorism, although critically important, cannot achieve our goals on its own, we must have a fifth strategy if we are to succeed. So then, since our problem is the state, and to defeat it we must break the power of governments, corporations, banking cartels, the media, the intelligentsia, and the clergy, why not copy from an entity who has taken this process to an art form? No one is as good at eliminating competition as the state itself. No one has more experience at killing governments, corrupting the media, discrediting the clergy, and baffling the intelligentsia than the state. No one is better at destroying a currency than the state. If we examine how the state kills competition, what tools the state uses to destroy governments, and how the state manipulates the storyline to always favor a pro-state agenda, then we can copy the methods of our enemy and turn them on him. We have but two limitations. We must do this task while keeping our actions within the zero aggression principle, and we must avoid the trap of central planning and leader dependency. That may be tricky, but it is not impossible for the species that figured out how to thrive during mass extinctions and ice ages. So what lessons can we learn from our enemy, the state, that we can use to kill governments, corrupt the media, discredit the clergy, and baffle the intelligentsia? During the 1940s, the major governments of the world were engrossed in a war that touched almost everyone alive at the time. The obvious aspects of the Second World War involved massive troop movements, the incineration of cities and the people living in them, incredible destruction, the rounding up and murdering of populations, and stark hunger for millions who were robbed to pay for it all. Everyone knows at least something about that war. What is less known about that time is that even when warplanes stopped filling the skies and tanks stopped rumbling across the earth, there continued unseen armies engaging in sedition, subversion, sabotage, and irregular warfare. Not uniformed armies marching in lines, taking orders, and throwing grenades, but workers fouling machines, nurses passing secret messages, radio broadcasters spreading propaganda, and riflemen selectively disposing of high-value targets. So, 3 governments were famously defeated in the wars of the 1940s, but in the decades that followed, dozens of governments were toppled, religions were perverted, cultures were crushed, and powerful corporations were brought to their knees. Was this done by activists chalking the sidewalk in front of police stations, video blogging about the Federal Reserve, or following some liberty cheerleader to his private gulch in the desert? No. The CIA, MI6, KGB, and Mossad did it with some of the tools in this book. If I do my job, I will show you the raw tools that should inspire you to develop that new strategy while respecting private property and the rights of the innocent, and doing so without central planning and without a great man. 4. The 3-part attack. Imagine a scorpion. It has 2 independent claws configured opposite of each other, used to agitate, distract, injure, and subdue its opponent. Of a very different design, the scorpion has a 3rd weapon, a long tail with a deadly venomous stinger that it uses only at the right moment for the purpose of delivering a paralyzing and debilitating blow. The 2 claws almost compete in the same area, badgering its enemy from opposite sides. The moment the claws have the complete attention of the enemy, the stinger comes in fast and delivers the deadly accurate injection, ending the struggle. The scorpion gives us a battle plan to emulate. We need to have the above-ground anarchist network on the one side represented by 1 claw, and we need the underground sabotage network on the other side represented by a separate claw. Then, seemingly unrelated to either, is the stinger with its irregular warfare, always present, patiently waiting for the right moment to strike a selective blow. Consider the scorpion as more than a 3-part killing machine. The adult scorpion, an arachnid related to spiders, will have as many as 12 eyes, 10 of which may operate independently. In addition to its actual eyes, it may have areas of its body that are not considered eyes, but still detect light and motion. So you could say the scorpion has a variety of viewpoints, all processing different types of information. The scorpion lacks the kind of central nervous system that humans have, so it has nothing like the decision-making brain we see in mammals. Rather, it has a series of nerve bundles attached to specific muscles and organs, sending impulses independent of other muscles and organs. So, for example, 1 or more eyes may send messages to a pincher, directing its motions and actions in a fight, without input from other eyes that may be sending messages to the other pincher, directing it independently during the same fight. This direct connection between its pinchers and its eyes can communicate messages much faster than in animals, where all messages have to travel to the brain for decision-making and central planning of all actions. In a very real sense, the scorpion possesses a decentralized and, even to a certain extent, a distributed decision-making system, making it far more of an effective fighter than a mammal of equal size, limited by central planning. Considering the example of the scorpion, it is my intent in this writing to bring together lessons learned from 150 years of anarchist writings, established military strategy, and balanced wisdom in order to guide a very disjointed, disorganized, and confused movement to become a more focused cause for freedom. It has been said, "When I was a child, I thought as a child, I spoke as a child, and I acted like a child. But a time came in my life when I was no longer a child, and it became prudent for me to put away childish things." That old saying is not a condemnation of childhood, it is an admonition to be the grown-up that we are. The wise remember the foolishness of their childhood and grow from it. At some point, key anarchists will see the need for their movement to mature and put away childish behavior. They will understand that they must stop continually embracing stunts formulated by children vying for attention. When that time comes, an operational field manual such as this one will come in handy. That's not to say this manual is perfect nor exhaustive. It is simply a step towards leaving behind childish thinking and childish beliefs and embracing the hard, honest facts of adulthood. Santa Claus, or insert your favorite great man here, will not magically appear to bring you gifts like secession, a night watchman government, a gold standard with full reserve banking, or a miraculous redistribution of wealth for all the happy workers of the world. Fantasies and dreams of sugar plums, no matter how carefully formed, will not set you free from the deeply evil men who profit from the state. Waving signs that say "End the Fed" will not somehow inspire the men to whom governments of the world owe some $57 trillion to suddenly play fair. The men who control and profit from the current system will not one day realize the people of the world don't want to be their slaves and just close up their banking cartels and slip off into the good night on their yachts. The hard reality is, as history has displayed for us far too often, those with power will murder on an unimaginable scale to maintain and expand their monopoly of power. Now that those powers that be control nuclear arsenals and have proven the propensity to use them on civilian populations, it is childish beyond belief to expect humans will ever achieve freedom while those men of power live. When you add into the equation the fact that these powerful men possess underground bunker systems, including long-term seed storage, and they have openly published their desire to control or drastically reduce the human population, why would any clear-thinking adult entertain the notion that simply winning an election, or drafting a new constitution, or passing a law, or repealing a law, or demanding governments behave will stop these monsters or the beasts they serve? And it is nothing but sheer cowardice to accept some slight pacification of one kind or another while passing this slavery on to your children and grandchildren. In fact, the over 250 million humans murdered by their own governments during the last century, that number does not include wars, could not have happened had our grandfathers and their grandfathers stood up and killed the state, rather than what they did, which was to take the same path used today by the current liberty movement and all those who attempt to make the state kinder, gentler, and more palatable to the masses. I stated earlier that I respect pacifists, and I stand by that. However, I don't agree with their philosophy. I do recognize that there exists a consistency in the philosophy of many pacifists. For example, Jainism and a very few Christians seems very consistent, but in most pacifists that I have encountered, there are glaring inconsistencies. Unfortunately, pacifism of the glaringly inconsistent type has deeply influenced many of the more famous liberty personalities. Of all people, students of libertarianism should understand the relationship between rights and responsibilities. For example, I have a right to my property, including my life, so long as I respect the same right of the property of others. However, if I fail to respect the property rights of another person, I relinquish the equal right of my property. Libertarians usually understand this and recognize it as the basis of the morality of self-defense. So if someone attempts to murder me, thereby attempting to destroy the property of my life, I can rightfully destroy the property of their life because they relinquished their right of that property when they attempted aggression upon me. Again, most people understand this naturally, even if they never thought out its philosophical basis. Where many people have fallen down is in their own responsibility to maintain their rights, and I believe this is where many libertarians have become confused by their exposure to inconsistent pacifists. The libertarians I am referring to here theoretically agree that self-defense is morally acceptable, and most do not call themselves pacifists, but they fail to arm themselves in any real manner, and if they were forced to defend themselves, they would have no idea how to do so. What they fail to realize is that there exists an inherent responsibility to self-defense that works hand in hand with their right of property. Inconsistent pacifists and waves of propaganda from the state have systematically taught people to expect protection to come from some outside authority or entity rather than the individual being responsible for their own security. This is what I was referring to when I said that, had our forefathers responded correctly to the advance of the state, the 20th century would not have been a century marked by constant wars and genocide. That doesn't excuse those acting on behalf of the state in the murders of hundreds of millions of people. It only means that there was a responsibility to stop the state, and our forefathers failed in their duty to protect us, their posterity. We now hold that responsibility. If we fail to take the actions that are required to protect ourselves, our property, and our posterity, that doesn't justify state actors who steal and murder, but it does place shame on our heads for the generations to come who we have failed to protect. Having established these uncomfortable facts, the grown-up anarchist is no longer left with the option to play nice and hope for the best. And yet, true anarchism is and must be a philosophy of peace. This seemingly contradictory position has but one solution. Since the zero-aggression principle allows for violence in the pursuit of self-defense, those who are suited for such action must train and prepare for selective, ethics-based decapitation of the beast. Those acting on behalf of their state masters who actively murder, rape, rob, and extort have relinquished their right of property in proportion to the amount they have aggressed. And those of us with the knowledge and the skill have a responsibility to do something about it. To say it more clearly, riflemen must have a place at our table, but their actions must be principled, patient, and carefully directed. Immature stunts are not becoming to men of action. A true warrior will not be found parading about, boasting of his prowess, waving flags, and pronouncing lines in the sand, while demanding marches on Washington or occupying some park bench or ranger station. The real warrior knows that fortifying sandcastles while playing army games in the forest are as childish as chalking sidewalks, yelling through megaphones, and whining about conspiracies. So if the riflemen expect to take a place at the table with the adults, they need to grow up and begin earning that place. They need to stop following self-glorifying leaders who entice them into open confrontations with authorities. They need to understand the purpose of camouflage and stop, metaphorically, decorating themselves in flashing neon while screeching their intentions like a drunken redneck on a party boat. Likewise, the above-ground liberty activists will need to grow up and stop acting like spoiled children, arguing over who is being mean to whom on social networks, while expending their energy and resources trying to get governments to give them permission to use cannabis. There are more important things than arguing with communists about the meaning of the word capitalism, and debating fascists about the veneration of flags, while whining about social justice warriors. The time has come to put aside the games of your childhood and get into the battle that is about to sweep across humanity. As you will read later in this manual, it's time for the above-ground network to embrace its 7-part job and begin the heavy lifting it will need to do to survive what the state will throw at us before it gives up the ghost. Childish thinking and obsolete methods may have served a purpose at some time, but one thing is clear. We have moved on, and childish thinking and obsolete methods are, or should be, dead. Once a thing dies, it must be disposed of quickly, or it will rot, stink, and spread disease. Thus, we build the fires and throw the past into the flames so that we may leave behind the pain and failures of days gone by and embrace the onslaught of challenges that the future brings. Speaking of destruction, funeral pyres, and the future, the state will not die easy. Anyone who tells you so is likely selling you snake oil while fishing for a monthly donation to their feel-good cause. The state will thrash about, wail, and strike out at anything it can reach before it dies. It will eat its own children and burn its own house before it accepts its demise. Make no mistake, the death of the beast will be an ugly sight to behold. When it dies, its death will burn a memory in the minds of humans that they will not quickly forget. The death pangs of the great dragon will scar not only humanity, but the earth itself in such a manner that 1,000 years of erosion will not heal the wounds. And the longer we put off this fight, the more powerful the beast becomes, and the more devastating those wounds will be.